The fastest way to fail is to tell people what you're about to do, because the moment you speak your plans out loud, you don't gain support, you lose power, and today, you'll understand exactly why silence wins. If this is hitting you right now, type silence in the comments. Lock it in. No more announcing, only executing. Silence protects your focus in a way most people underestimate because focus is not just about what you do, it's about what you don't let in. The moment you start telling people your plans, you invite noise into something that requires clarity. Every opinion, every reaction, even a simple, "Are you sure?" can plant a seed of distraction. And distraction doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it shows up as overthinking, hesitation, or the urge to adjust a plan that was perfectly fine before you shared it. When you stay silent, your mind operates in a closed loop. There's no external pressure to perform, no need to explain your progress, and no temptation to defend your decisions. That mental space becomes incredibly powerful because all your energy is directed toward execution instead of conversation. You're not splitting your attention between doing the work and managing people's expectations. You're simply doing the work. Focus is fragile. It breaks easily when exposed to too many inputs. Most people lose momentum not because they lack discipline, but because they dilute their attention across too many voices. One person tells you to go faster, another tells you to be careful, someone else questions your ability, and suddenly your clear path turns into confusion. Silence removes that interference. It keeps your path straight. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you don't talk about your plans, you naturally think about them less in a performative way and more in a practical way. You stop imagining how things will look and start concentrating on what needs to be done. That shift from imagination to action is where real progress happens. Talking feeds the image, silence feeds the process. And the longer you stay quiet, the stronger your focus becomes. It turns into a habit where your default is action, not explanation. You stop seeking validation, you stop reacting to external energy, and you start building an internal rhythm that no one else can disrupt. Not everyone deserves access to your vision, and understanding this changes how you move completely. Your plans are not just ideas, they're fragile in the beginning, still forming, still gaining strength. When you share them too early, you're placing something unfinished into the hands of people who may not value it, understand it, or protect it. And the truth is, most people won't treat your vision with the same care you do. Access is a privilege, not a default. Just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they're aligned with where you're going. Some people operate from their own fears, limitations, and past failures. When they hear your plans, they don't respond with possibility. They respond with caution, doubt, or even subtle discouragement. Not because they want to harm you, but because they can't see beyond their own mindset. And if you're not careful, you start seeing through their lens instead of your own. There are also people who listen not to support, but to compare. The moment you reveal your goals, you unintentionally enter a silent competition. They measure your ambition against theirs, and sometimes that creates tension, envy, or quiet resistance. You may not notice it immediately, but it shows up in small ways: lack of encouragement, passive comments, or a sudden shift in energy. Your vision becomes exposed in an environment that isn't built to nurture it. Keeping your plans private allows them to grow without interference. It gives you time to develop confidence in what you're doing before it faces the outside world. When something is strong, it can handle opinions, but when it's still forming, it needs protection. Silence becomes that protection. You also learn to trust yourself more. When you stop seeking reactions from others, you rely on your own judgment. You make decisions based on clarity instead of approval. That builds a different kind of confidence, one that isn't shaken by someone else's perspective. And over time, you become more intentional about who gets to see your vision, realizing that not everyone needs a front row seat to something that isn't ready to be seen. Early validation feels good, but it quietly sabotages real execution in a way most people don't notice. The moment you tell someone your plan and they respond with excitement, "That's amazing, you're going to do great," Your brain registers that reaction as a reward. It releases a sense of satisfaction similar to what you'd feel after actually accomplishing something. But here's the problem: you haven't done anything yet. You've only talked about it. That artificial sense of progress lowers your urgency. The hunger that was pushing you to act begins to fade because, in a subtle way, you already feel recognized. Your mind confuses intention with achievement. Instead of waking up driven to prove something, you wake up feeling like you've already been acknowledged, and when that edge disappears, so does your consistency. Execution requires tension, the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That tension creates movement, but when you get early validation, that gap feels smaller than it actually is. You relax too soon, you delay actions, you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow because emotionally you've already tasted success through someone else's approval. There's another layer to this. Once you've told people your plans, you may feel like you've already committed publicly. That creates pressure, but not the kind that drives action, the kind that creates avoidance. If you don't follow through immediately, you start feeling uncomfortable, even embarrassed. Instead of pushing forward, you withdraw. You stop talking about it, and eventually, you stop working on it altogether. Real progress is quiet and often uncomfortable. It doesn't come with applause in the beginning. It comes with discipline, repetition, and showing up when no one is watching. When you remove early validation, you keep that internal drive intact. You stay connected to the work itself, not the reaction to the work. And when you finally achieve something without announcing it beforehand, the satisfaction is different. It's deeper, more grounded, and entirely yours, because it was built through action, not fueled by premature praise. Energy is a limited resource, and most people waste it through unnecessary talking without realizing the cost. Every time you explain your plans, describe your goals, or walk someone through what you're about to do, you're spending mental and emotional energy that could have been used to actually move forward. It feels harmless because talking is easy, but that's exactly why it becomes dangerous. It creates the illusion of progress while quietly draining the fuel needed for real action. When you speak about your plans, your brain shifts into presentation mode instead of execution mode. You start thinking about how to explain things clearly, how to sound confident, how to answer questions. That mental shift pulls you away from the raw focus required to build something. Instead of working, you're narrating. Instead of solving problems, you're describing intentions. And over time, that habit conditions you to prioritize talking over doing. There's also an emotional cost. Every conversation about your plans triggers reactions, positive, negative, or neutral. Even a simple response requires you to process it. You think about what they meant, how they said it, whether they believe in you or not. That internal processing consumes energy. It lingers in your mind long after the conversation ends, taking up space that should be reserved for creativity and problem solving. The more people you tell, the more energy leaks. You repeat the same explanation multiple times, slightly adjusting your story depending on who you're talking to. Each repetition chips away at your enthusiasm. What once felt exciting starts to feel routine, even before you've begun. The idea loses its freshness because you've talked it out so many times instead of building it. Silence preserves that energy. It keeps your excitement intact and channels it into action rather than conversation. When you don't talk about what you're going to do, that unspent energy has nowhere to go but into the work itself. It sharpens your focus, strengthens your discipline, and allows you to operate with a level of intensity that most people never reach because they've already exhausted themselves just by talking. Letting results speak louder than intentions is about shifting your identity from someone who announces to someone who proves. Intentions are easy to create and even easier to share. They sound impressive, they feel meaningful, and in the moment, they can make you appear driven. But intentions alone carry no weight in the real world. Anyone can say what they're going to do. Very few actually do it. That's why people don't truly respect words, they respond to evidence. When you constantly talk about your plans, you build a reputation based on promises. And the more you promise without delivering, the more your credibility weakens, even if people don't say it out loud. They begin to associate you with ideas instead of outcomes. Over time, your words lose impact because they've been heard before without being backed by visible results. On the other hand, when you stay silent and focus on execution, something powerful happens. You remove the expectation phase entirely. No one is waiting, no one is judging your progress, and no one is forming opinions about your ability. You're operating in a space where the only thing that matters is what you produce. That creates a different level of discipline because your satisfaction comes from completion, not from conversation. There's also a psychological edge to this. When people don't know what you're working on, they don't see it coming. Your progress becomes unexpected, and that surprise amplifies the impact of your results. What would have been a predictable outcome turns into something impressive because it wasn't announced in advance. Silence builds anticipation without effort, and results deliver the payoff. More importantly, relying on results forces you to raise your standards. You can't hide behind words. You can't explain your way out of inaction. The only way to express your vision is to bring it into reality. That pressure refines your habits, strengthens your consistency, and aligns your actions with your goals. And once you build a pattern of letting your work speak for you, you no longer feel the need to explain anything because the proof is already there for anyone who chooses to see it. Privacy builds power because it gives you control over your direction, your pace, and your narrative. The moment you make your plans public, you hand over a portion of that control to other people. They begin to form expectations about what you should do, how fast you should do it, and what success should look like. Even if they never say it directly, that pressure exists and it can subtly influence your decisions. Instead of moving based on what's best for you, you start adjusting based on what others might think. When you keep things private, you remove that external influence. You're free to experiment, to fail quietly, to change direction without having to explain yourself. That freedom is powerful because real growth is messy. It involves mistakes, adjustments, and periods where nothing seems to work. If every step of that process is exposed, you may feel the need to appear consistent or confident, even when you're figuring things out. Privacy allows you to be honest with yourself without performing for others. Control also means you decide when and how your story is told. If you share everything too early, people witness the unfinished version of your journey. They see the doubts, the delays, the uncertainty, and they form opinions based on that incomplete picture. But when you stay private, you get to present the result on your own terms. You reveal what matters, not every step that led there. There's also a strategic advantage in not showing your hand too soon. When people don't know your next move, they can't predict you, compete with you effectively, or interfere with your process. You operate with a level of independence that keeps your progress uninterrupted. Your focus remains internal, not reactive. Privacy strengthens your decision-making as well. Without constant input from others, you rely more on your own judgment. You learn to trust your instincts, evaluate your progress honestly, and make choices based on clarity rather than approval. That builds a deeper kind of confidence, one that comes from self-reliance instead of external validation. Most people don't respond from a place of possibility. They respond from their own limitations. Someone who has failed at something similar might project that failure onto you. Someone who fears risk might highlight everything that could go wrong. Even well-meaning advice often comes wrapped in caution, and caution, when absorbed too early, can slow you down. What started as a clear path becomes crowded with alternative routes, warnings, and second guesses. Doubt doesn't always arrive loudly. It often starts as a small question in your mind. What if they're right? That single thought is enough to disrupt your momentum. You begin to analyze more than you act. You hesitate before taking steps that once felt obvious. You start seeking more opinions to confirm or deny the first one, and in doing so, you multiply the noise instead of reducing it. There's also a tendency to give more weight to external voices than your own, especially when those voices sound confident. Even if you've thought deeply about your plan, one strong opinion can make you question everything. That shift weakens your trust in yourself. And once that trust is shaken, consistency becomes difficult. You're no longer moving with conviction, you're moving with uncertainty. Silence protects you from that early interference. It allows your ideas to develop fully before they're tested by outside perspectives. When something is strong and well executed, it can withstand opinions. But when it's still forming, it needs space, not scrutiny. By limiting who you share your plans with, you reduce the number of voices that can influence your thinking. And when you rely more on your own judgment, you build a kind of confidence that isn't easily shaken because it wasn't built on someone else's approval in the first place. Moving in silence and shocking people with outcomes is about understanding the difference between visibility and value. Most people try to be seen before they've built anything worth seeing. They announce their goals, share their next steps, and look for attention early. But when everything is visible from the start, there's no impact left when the result finally arrives. It feels expected, predictable, almost routine. The moment loses its power because it was already explained. When you move in silence, you remove that predictability. No one knows what you're working on, how far you've progressed, or what you're about to reveal. That absence of information creates a gap, and when the result appears, it fills that gap in a way that feels sudden and powerful. What you've built doesn't just exist, it lands. It interrupts assumptions people had about you and replaces them with something undeniable. Silence also keeps you grounded in the process rather than the perception. You're not focused on how things look to others. You're focused on how well they're built. That shift changes the quality of your work. Without the distraction of external attention, you refine more, you improve more, and you stay committed longer. The outcome becomes stronger because it wasn't rushed for the sake of showing progress. There's a psychological edge in this approach as well. When people don't see your journey, they often underestimate you. They assume you're doing less than you actually are. That underestimation works in your favor because it removes pressure and expectation. You're free to grow without being constantly evaluated. And when the result finally shows up, it challenges their perception instantly. More importantly, it builds a habit of letting your work define you. You're no longer dependent on explaining your vision or convincing others of your potential. The proof appears in what you've created. That kind of presence is hard to ignore because it doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. And the most powerful part is that the surprise isn't just for others, it's for you as well, because you realize how far you've come without needing to announce a single step along the way.